Welcome to Motivational Humanity. You are not alone. The most freeing day of your life is the day you realize you don't owe everyone an explanation. There comes a moment when you realize how exhausting it has been to constantly explain yourself to everyone around you. You have spent years, maybe decades, trying to make yourself clear, trying to make people understand why you feel the way you do, why you make certain choices, why your boundaries exist. Every word you spoke, every justification you offered, every sigh and careful explanation was born out of a subtle fear. The fear of being judged, the fear of being rejected, the fear of not being enough. You wanted others to see your intentions, to validate your choices, to reassure you that your feelings were reasonable. But in trying to protect yourself through explanations, you often sacrifice the very thing you were seeking: peace. You over-explained to feel safe, but the truth is that safety never came from their understanding. It only came from the act of trying to please, to justify, to prove that you deserve space, love, and respect. And over time, you begin to feel weary. Your energy drains because every interaction becomes a subtle negotiation. You notice the pattern. The more you explain, the less you feel seen, the more your own voice is buried beneath the weight of other people's opinions. And the hardest part is that you didn't even realize it. You thought you were being responsible, accountable, mature, but in truth, you were overextending yourself emotionally to compensate for other people's inability to hold space for your feelings. And when you finally pause, even for a moment, you feel the truth quietly settling in. The explanations were never really for them. They were for you, or at least they were supposed to be, but now you see how deeply they have kept you from your own freedom. The simple act of noticing this is revolutionary. You begin to understand that not every action, every feeling, every thought needs to be justified, that you can honor your experiences without seeking permission. That sometimes the most courageous and liberating thing you can do is to simply stop explaining, to release the habit that has kept you tethered to other people's approval, and to finally give yourself permission to just be. And when you practice this, even in small ways, you start to reclaim a part of yourself that has been missing, the part that trusts its own voice, its own intuition, its own worth. You learn that the energy once spent in endless explanations can now be invested in presence, in calm, in growth, in self-respect. You are not abandoning responsibility or connection. You are choosing the quiet strength of simply being seen by yourself first. You begin to notice a subtle but profound shift. Your heart feels lighter, your mind quieter, and the world doesn't seem so heavy. You are no longer negotiating your worth with every conversation because you finally understand that your worth never needed their permission in the first place. Vulnerability is a word that has been misunderstood for so long, as if it were a weakness rather than the quiet, powerful source of strength that it truly is. You might have been taught to hide your feelings, to conceal the cracks and imperfections, to only show what is safe and socially acceptable. And so you learn to armor yourself. You learn to present a polished version of yourself that could survive the judgment of others, a version that didn't rock the boat, didn't take risks, didn't ask for more than it could give. You smiled when you didn't feel like smiling. You nodded when you didn't agree. You softened your truth so it could fit into the expectations of others. You did all of this because you feared the consequences of being fully seen. You feared rejection. You feared ridicule. You feared the hollow silence that sometimes follows when the world doesn't understand the depth of your heart. And yet, somewhere deep inside, there was a voice, a quiet, almost imperceptible voice that longed for something different. It longed to be honest, to speak without apology, to show without explanation, to exist without constantly negotiating its worth. That voice was asking you to step into vulnerability, but stepping into it felt terrifying. Vulnerability meant risk. It meant the possibility of being misunderstood. It meant opening yourself to emotions that had been pushed aside tucked away, or dressed up in excuses to make them palatable. You might have told yourself that it wasn't safe to be that raw, that the world would never tolerate the fullness of who you are. And so you continued to protect yourself by over-explaining, by softening without pretense, without the burden of explanation. And this is the paradox. You can be real without having to convince anyone else that you are worthy of love, respect, or understanding. You don't have to explain the emotions that bubble up inside you, because emotions are not facts to be defended. They are signals, they are guides, they are your internal compass trying to point you toward what matters most. You can feel your sadness, your anger, your frustration, your longing, and you can honor it without performing a narrative for someone else. That is vulnerability, that is courage. Imagine the freedom of saying what you need to say without fear of judgment, without rehearsing the perfect words, without trimming your truth so that it is easier to digest. Imagine allowing yourself to cry in a space where nobody is demanding an explanation, to be frustrated in a room where nobody is analyzing your motives, to be joyful in a moment where nobody is measuring whether your happiness is deserved. This is not reckless abandon. It is self-respect in its most profound form. When you stop explaining your feelings to everyone else, you create a sacred space within yourself where your emotions are valid simply because they exist. They don't need a justification. They don't need a witness. They don't need an audience. They simply need acknowledgement, recognition, and care from the one person who has been with you through everything, yourself. Learning to embrace vulnerability without defense requires patience. It requires a willingness to sit with discomfort, because the first time you stop explaining yourself, you may feel the pull of guilt. Guilt is the echo of a life spent trying to please others. You might worry that your relationships will falter, that people will misunderstand your intentions, that you will appear selfish. You might feel exposed and shaky, as though you are standing on a precipice with no safety net. And in many ways, that feeling is accurate. It is unfamiliar terrain, because for so long, you have lived in a world where self-abandonment was disguised as responsibility, where over-explaining was mistaken for care, where pleasing others took precedence over honoring yourself. But this is precisely where growth lives. The discomfort is the doorway to something you have longed for, but didn't know how to claim. Freedom from the need for approval. Freedom from the exhaustion of constant justification. Freedom from the unending burden of explaining your worth. It is important to recognize that vulnerability is not the same as oversharing or self-flagellation. It is not a weapon or a performance. It is a quiet, steady courage. It is choosing to show up with integrity, even when the outcome is uncertain. It is being honest about what you need and what you feel, while resisting the temptation to narrate it, to make it acceptable. It is trusting that your value does not depend on others understanding your choices or your emotions. You can allow yourself to be raw, to be imperfect, to be human, without having to provide a commentary track for the world. When you practice vulnerability without defense, you begin to notice subtle shifts in how you experience life. You no longer feel compelled to justify your decisions at every turn. You no longer spend energy convincing others that your feelings are valid. You begin to notice that the weight you carried for so long, this invisible pressure to perform your emotions, to manage perceptions, to constantly negotiate your place in the world, is slowly lifting. It doesn't vanish overnight, but with each moment you resist the urge to explain, you reclaim a piece of yourself that had been lost. You begin to trust your own voice, your own instincts, your own sense of worth. And when that trust grows, it ripples into every area of your life. Relationships feel different because you are present, not performative. Choices feel different because they are aligned with your values, not with what you think others expect. Moments feel different because you are no longer measuring them through the lens of others' approval. This practice is not about isolation. It is about clarity. You are not turning your back on connection. You are refining it. You are choosing interactions that honor both yourself and others without sacrificing one for the other. You are learning that it is possible to be compassionate, empathetic, and loving without losing yourself in the process. Vulnerability without defense teaches you that strength is not in convincing, persuading, or defending. It is in showing up fully, even when there is no guarantee of validation. It is in saying, "This is who I am. This is how I feel. I am enough, whether or not you understand." The first time you practice this, it may feel strange, even terrifying, but gradually the act of honoring your truth without explanation becomes natural. It becomes a muscle that grows stronger with use. And with that strength comes a quiet confidence, a sense of peace that you may have thought was impossible. You realize that your value is inherent, not negotiable, and that your emotional life belongs to you first and foremost. You realize that the energy once spent defending your feelings can now be invested in growth, in creativity, in joy, in love that is freely given rather than sought after. And the world, surprisingly, does not collapse. Relationships may shift, people may react, but you remain anchored in the one truth that matters most. Your self-respect is non-negotiable. Your voice is valid, and your heart deserves to be seen without apology. This is the quiet revolution of vulnerability without defense. It is a practice of showing up, of leaning into discomfort, of refusing to shrink for the comfort of others. It is the acknowledgement that your feelings, your experiences, and your life are worthy, not because they are acceptable to everyone, but because they belong to you. You are learning to live without the constant commentary of explanation, without the burden of justification, without the exhausting effort to make everyone else understand. You are learning to live with your own witness, your own validation, and your own quiet strength. And in that space, in that stillness, you begin to heal. You begin to thrive. You begin to experience the depth of life, not through the lens of approval, but through the lens of your own courageous, authentic presence. Courage is a strange and quiet companion. It doesn't always arrive with a trumpet fanfare or a grand announcement. More often, it arrives softly, almost imperceptibly, in the moments when you are asked to stand your ground, to speak your truth, or to simply exist without apology. And the first time you recognize it, it feels frightening. You may feel unsteady, as if the ground beneath you has shifted, because courage asks you to step into spaces where outcomes are uncertain, where reactions are unpredictable, and where the world may not validate or even understand your choices. For so long, you may have measured your worth through the eyes of others, believing that being liked, being approved, being understood was the ultimate proof that you belonged. But courage teaches you that belonging doesn't come from permission. It doesn't come from reassurance or explanations or carefully crafted justifications. It comes from claiming your right to exist fully, even when others misinterpret, judge, or fail to see you. And that is a revolutionary idea. The idea that your value is inherent, that your presence is enough, that you do not need to bend, shrink, or over-explain to survive or to be loved. Being courageous in this way is not easy. There is a subtle, persistent pull to retreat, to soften your edges, to explain yourself one more time in order to keep the peace, to maintain comfort, to avoid conflict. But the cost of that retreat is immense. Each time you give in, you are surrendering a piece of your authenticity, a piece of your voice, a piece of your trust in yourself. You begin to notice the fatigue that accumulates from constantly negotiating your identity with the world. You notice the quiet dissatisfaction, the small gnawing regret, the way your own needs are always folded beneath the weight of other people's expectations. Courage asks you to confront that fatigue and to recognize that the effort to make everyone understand you is never sustainable. That energy, if redirected inward, can fuel self-respect, clarity, and presence. Courage is the choice to stop using yourself as a bridge to someone else's understanding and to instead walk in your own power, even if that path is lonely at first. It is natural to fear being misunderstood. Fear is an instinct designed to protect you from harm, but it often exaggerates the threat of being judged or rejected. You might worry that someone will misinterpret your intentions, that they will see your actions as selfish, or that they will respond with anger or disappointment. And in that fear, it is tempting to over-explain, to soften, to rationalize, to convince. But courage asks you to resist that temptation. It asks you to sit with the discomfort, to tolerate the unknown, to accept that your worth is not dependent on another person's comprehension. You are allowed to be misunderstood. You are allowed to be imperfect. You are allowed to have boundaries and needs that are not universally recognized. And each time you practice this, each time you step into the quiet audacity of simply being yourself, you train your mind and heart to trust your own truth. Courage also comes with a profound paradox. The more you embrace it, the more peaceful you feel, even when the external world is chaotic. When you stop fighting to be understood, when you stop negotiating your value with every interaction, you discover an internal stability that does not rely on the reactions of others. You are no longer subject to the swings of approval or disapproval because your center of gravity has shifted inward. This does not mean that your life becomes easier or that everyone will respond kindly, but it does mean that you are no longer the source of your own turmoil. The anxieties that once drove you to over-explain, to seek reassurance, to anticipate judgment begin to soften, and in their place grows a sense of quiet confidence, a steady, resilient understanding that you are capable of navigating life's complexities without sacrificing your integrity, without diminishing your own voice, and without constantly asking permission to exist. Courage is also intimately tied to boundaries. To act courageously, you must often say no to what does not serve your well-being, even when doing so might provoke misunderstanding or discomfort. You may find yourself facing questions, judgment, or even anger from those who have benefited from your previous habit of over-explaining. And yet, courage calls you to remember that your peace, your clarity, your self-respect cannot be negotiated for the comfort of others. You learn that it is possible to be compassionate and firm simultaneously, to honor yourself without devaluing someone else, and to maintain connection without sacrificing authenticity. Courage, in this sense, is a muscle that strengthens each time you resist the old patterns of explanation, defense, or justification. It is quiet, but it is transformative. In stepping into this courage, you also begin to understand the subtle freedom of being misunderstood. Not everyone will understand why you make the choices you make. Not everyone will accept the boundaries you set or the life you choose to live. And that is not a reflection of your inadequacy. It is a reflection of their limitations. Courage teaches you to stop internalizing these limitations as a judgment of your worth. You can be fully present in your life, fully honest about your feelings and needs, and fully committed to your growth without needing the constant validation of others. This is not arrogance, it is self-trust. It is the quiet acknowledgement that your existence, your choices, and your feelings are valid because they are yours. Another important aspect of this courage is resilience. Courage does not guarantee that others will respond positively. People may misinterpret, push back, or even reject you. And yet, by practicing this quiet courage repeatedly, you become resilient, not because you have hardened your heart, but because you have strengthened your relationship with yourself. You learn that the impact of someone else's misunderstanding is temporary, but the impact of betraying your own truth is lasting. And this awareness shifts your priorities. You no longer expend precious energy managing perceptions. You no longer sacrifice authenticity for comfort. You begin to allocate your energy toward growth, clarity, and relationships that honor both parties. Courage is also an invitation to embrace imperfection. In the past, the need to explain may have been rooted in the fear of making mistakes or being judged for flaws. Courage allows you to accept that mistakes are not indicators of inadequacy, but of humanity. You can navigate life with authenticity, learning, adjusting, and evolving without needing to constantly defend every choice or emotion. And in this acceptance, a new freedom emerges, the freedom to be fully human, fully present, fully alive. The quiet beauty of this courage is that it multiplies. Once you practice standing in your truth without justification, it becomes easier to apply it in all areas of life: relationships, work, personal growth, and even in your own self-perception. You begin to recognize the patterns of self-doubt and the old habits of over-explaining as they arise, and you choose differently, moment by moment. And each choice builds momentum, a ripple effect that strengthens your emotional resilience, your clarity, and your sense of inner peace. Ultimately, courage teaches you that you are not defined by how others interpret you. You are not responsible for shaping their understanding. You are responsible for showing up, for honoring yourself, and for living in alignment with your values. And in doing so, you create a life rooted not in approval, not in explanation, but in authenticity. The energy once spent defending your worth can now be devoted to meaningful growth, deep connection, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that you are enough exactly as you are. In this space, courage and freedom are inseparable. One cannot exist without the other. And as you continue to step into this courage, the world becomes not a place of constant negotiation, but a place where you can finally inhabit your truth without apology, without fear, and without the endless need to explain. Boundaries are often misunderstood as walls, as barriers meant to push people away or to isolate yourself from connection. But the truth is that boundaries are not walls. They are lines drawn in respect for yourself, in recognition of your worth, in acknowledgement of what you will and will not tolerate. Every time you stop explaining yourself unnecessarily, you are practicing a boundary. Every time you allow yourself to feel without justifying those feelings to someone else, you are strengthening a boundary. Every time you say no without guilt, without elaborate reasoning, without performing a justification for others to accept, you are creating space for your inner life to breathe, to heal, to grow. Boundaries are not unkind. They are acts of courage and self-respect. And yet, the act of setting boundaries can be one of the most difficult things you ever do, because it challenges years of conditioning that told you your value depended on others' approval, that love required endless explanation, that respect was something to be earned by constant negotiation. It is natural to feel uncomfortable when you first begin to enforce boundaries. You may feel guilt, anxiety, or doubt. You may fear the reactions of people who have grown accustomed to your habit of over-explaining, people who have benefited from your willingness to bend, people who have relied on your energy to smooth their discomfort. And in that fear, there is an urge to soften, to justify, to explain away the very things that are keeping you safe. But this is precisely where the work begins. A boundary, like courage, asks you to lean into discomfort. It asks you to acknowledge that saying no or holding space for yourself is not an act of selfishness, but an act of preservation. It asks you to trust that your peace, your energy, your well-being are not negotiable, and that your refusal to explain your worth does not make you unkind or unreasonable. It makes you human. Setting boundaries is a practice of self-honesty. It requires you to recognize the moments when you are overextending, when your energy is being drained, when your emotions are being compromised for the comfort of others. You may realize that for years you have been apologizing for your existence, excusing your choices, and softening your truth in ways that were unnecessary. You may recognize patterns in relationships, work, and daily life where your natural generosity, empathy, and openness were met with entitlement or expectation rather than reciprocity. And in this recognition, you begin to understand that boundaries are not about controlling others. They are about controlling your own life, your own responses, your own energy. Boundaries are a declaration that your inner world matters, that your feelings matter, and that your presence cannot be negotiated for the convenience of someone else. When you embrace boundaries fully, you begin to see how liberating they are. You notice a subtle shift in the way you carry yourself. You feel lighter because you are no longer burdened by the constant need to justify your existence. You feel calmer because your interactions are no longer a negotiation between who you are and who others want you to be. You feel stronger because your energy is invested where it is valued, not where it is expected. Boundaries teach you that your responsibility is to yourself first, that your peace is paramount, and that your life is not meant to be lived in perpetual explanation or defense. In fact, each time you choose a boundary over an explanation, you reinforce the truth that you are allowed to exist without apology, allowed to prioritize your well-being without guilt, allowed to take up space without permission. Boundaries also create clarity in relationships. When you stop explaining every feeling, decision, or boundary, you filter the noise. You begin to notice which relationships are mutual, respectful, and supportive, and which relationships are based on expectation, manipulation, or imbalance. You learn to observe without judgment, to see clearly without over-explaining, and to respond in ways that honor both yourself and others. This is not about severing connections or closing doors. It is about creating a framework in which sustainable, if they require your constant justification, if they demand your energy to validate them, if they thrive only when you shrink, soften, or accommodate. Boundaries allow relationships to breathe, to exist in truth, to be based on mutual respect rather than endless negotiation. Practicing boundaries requires repetition and patience. At first, the act of saying no, of remaining silent instead of over-explaining, of resisting the urge to justify, may feel awkward or even frightening. You may encounter resistance from others and even from yourself. Old patterns are powerful. They have been reinforced over decades. But each time you choose differently, each time you honor yourself without explanation, you build resilience and self-trust. You strengthen the muscle that allows you to navigate life with authenticity, courage, and calm. You begin to notice the difference between choosing to give for love and choosing to give out of obligation or fear. You recognize that your boundaries are not a rejection of others, but a preservation of your own heart and mind. The beauty of boundaries is that they lead to growth. By practicing them, you are creating a space in which your inner life can flourish. You reclaim energy that was once wasted on over-explaining, defending, and negotiating your worth. You can invest that energy into meaningful work, creative pursuits, emotional healing, and relationships that honor both parties. You begin to operate from a place of calm, clarity, and confidence rather than anxiety, self-doubt, or compulsion. You notice that when you stop explaining, your voice becomes stronger, your presence becomes steadier, and your interactions become more intentional. Boundaries create not isolation, but empowerment. They create a framework in which your life is aligned with your values, your heart, and your truth. Ultimately, boundaries teach the quiet but powerful lesson that your peace is your responsibility. They remind you that saying no, holding space for yourself, and resisting the need to explain does not make you unkind, weak, or unloving. It makes you human. It makes you brave. It makes you whole. Every time you practice this, you are reclaiming parts of yourself that were lost to over-explaining, people-pleasing, and self-doubt. Every time you honor a boundary, you reinforce the truth that your life belongs to you first and foremost, and that in honoring yourself, you create a life that is authentic, grounded, and full of quiet strength. And in that space, in that freedom, something remarkable happens. You begin to see that healing does not come from endless justification or defense. Healing comes from presence, from integrity, from the courage to honor yourself even when it feels uncomfortable. Healing comes from trusting your own heart, from standing firm without aggression, from choosing peace over approval. And when you embrace this, you find that your energy, your relationships, and your own sense of self are transformed. Boundaries are not a limitation. They are the pathway to the life you were always meant to live. They are not a barrier. They are an invitation to your own strength, clarity, and authentic growth. Growth is often quieter than we expect. It doesn't always come with fireworks, applause, or sudden transformations. More often, it comes in subtle shifts, small awakenings, and moments when you realize that the person you were yesterday no longer defines the person you are today. Growth comes after the courage to stop over-explaining, after the patience to sit in your own vulnerability, after the strength to hold boundaries without guilt, and after the realization that your worth is inherent and cannot be negotiated. It is the quiet evolution of self, the steady unfolding of your own inner strength, and the reclamation of a life that is fully yours. Growth is the reward for choosing authenticity over approval, for trusting your own voice over the constant commentary of others, and for refusing to shrink to fit someone else's expectations. It is not instantaneous and it is not always dramatic, but it is profoundly transformative. At first, this growth may feel uncomfortable because it challenges old patterns, habits, and beliefs that have been reinforced for years. You may feel uncertainty as you navigate the unfamiliar terrain of self-trust and inner authority. You may notice that relationships shift, that some people pull away, and that your own sense of identity is being tested. And yet, this is precisely where growth thrives, in the space between the known and the unknown, in the tension of being fully yourself without needing validation, and in the courage to keep showing up even when the path ahead is unclear. You begin to understand that growth is not about perfection, external recognition, or controlling outcomes. It is about becoming more deeply aligned with your own truth, more compassionate toward yourself, and more willing to honor your own needs without apology. One of the most remarkable aspects of this growth is the sense of freedom it brings. When you stop explaining yourself, when you refuse to negotiate your worth for comfort or approval, you begin to experience life differently. You no longer carry the invisible weight of justifying your feelings, decisions, and boundaries. Your energy is no longer drained by constant negotiation with the world. Instead, it is available for presence, creativity, reflection, and connection that feels authentic and mutual. You notice a profound shift. Your life becomes less about performing for others and more about inhabiting your own heart, your own values, and your own path. Growth is the liberation that comes from trusting that you are enough exactly as you are. This growth also brings clarity. You start to see patterns in your life with greater precision. You notice which relationships nourish you and which ones deplete you. You see the difference between connection that is reciprocal and relationships that are transactional or conditional. You recognize the moments when you have overgiven, over-explained, or over-justified, and you see clearly how those habits no longer serve you. With this awareness, you begin to make choices that are more aligned with your well-being. You prioritize what matters, protect your energy, and allow yourself to step fully into spaces and opportunities that support your growth. And as you do, you find that life feels more expansive, more meaningful, and more aligned with the deepest parts of who you are. Another aspect of growth is the deepening of self-trust. For years, you may have looked outside yourself for validation